If someone cuts you off in traffic, you get mad, right? We all do. But if you find out they had lost a tire or their steering suddenly froze up, making their car lurch in front of you, especially if they ended up being badly injured, well, you cut them some slack. Motivational writer Stephen Covey tells about a man on a subway who watched in frustration as another passenger just let his kids run wild. They were climbing up and over the seats, bothering other passengers, making noise, bickering and horseplaying around until you could read annoyance on a lot of faces. And finally this guy cleared his throat and said to the laid-back father, "Look, fella, why don't you crack your whip a bit and do your job? Your kids are a giant pain. Are you blind or what?" Words to that effect. And if you remember Covey's story, the dad looked up at his accuser with anguish in his eyes. "You're right," he said hesitantly. "I guess I should do something. But we just came from my wife's funeral. The kids just lost their mom. And I guess they're just not themselves. I'm sorry." Well, you can imagine the long, embarrassed pause with the clackety-clack of the subway wheels reminding everyone listening in that subway car that we don't always know the whole story. There are pages hidden from our view and funerals we don't know about. Have you ever launched into a mini grudge or maybe even a maxi one only to find out that you didn't know about something? You go into work, and the same guy who's late every single day is missing again, and everybody shakes their head. Some people. How does he get away with it? But then around 10 in the morning, the word begins to quietly slip its way down the halls and corridors. Well, Tom's wife was killed in a car crash last night. Until that moment, you were so mad. But all at once, in the famous words of Hollywood's Saturday Night Live, you say, "Oh, never mind." And the great speech you had constructed in your mind just kind of dies right there. In our blindness, we often nurture grudges. We're mad and resentful because we don't know all of the facts. But try going at it from the other side of that subway car. How often are we improperly mad at that other person because we don't take into account their blindness? Question. You're standing on that same crowded New York subway, eagerly riding to a World Series game. All of a sudden, someone really tromps on your foot. They mash it, but good, yow! And you whirl around to scream at them, "What's the matter with you? Are you blind?" Just then you notice their dark glasses, their white cane, and that attack line just dies in your throat. Are you blind? Yes, they are blind. And of course, we don't get angry at a blind person for stepping on our toes. They can't help it. They didn't do it intentionally. Vera Sinton tells a story with a pretty familiar tagline. In 1987, she writes, millions of viewers watched television interviews with Gordon Wilson. Now, he and his daughter were buried in rubble by a bomb blast at a public parade in Northern Ireland. He was holding her hand as she died. Well, Northern Ireland has been the scene of simmering frustration for long decades now. We'll all remember, and we've all seen the CNN reports of those bomb blasts, the endless terrorism going on between IRA's Sinn Féin organization and the Orange Men, Catholics against Protestants. And this Gordon Wilson had just lost a daughter to the violence, to the troubles. But notice his response as Sinton tells the story. I'm quoting. He was holding her hand as she died. but he refused to nurse ill will against the bombers. I shall pray for them tonight and every night. God forgive them, for they don't know what they do. I know you've heard that line before, and so have I. God forgive them, for they don't know what they do. I choose not to be angry, because the person who just stepped on my foot was a blind person. I choose not to hold a grudge because the person who lied about me was confused and mixed up and scared, feeling so inadequate. I choose not to retaliate for this bombing because the people who lit the fuse were spiritually blind, morally impoverished by the accumulated effect of a million small hurts I don't know anything about. Now, it's true. There is a limit to this. There's blindness, and there's also evil. It's painfully true that people sometimes set off bombs, and they know exactly what they do. They drive nails into an innocent Savior's hands, and they do it with their eyes wide open. But how sobering to see that Jesus Christ, who was receiving those hammer blows, gave the Roman soldiers the benefit of the doubt. Father, forgive them, he prayed. They're blind. They don't know what they're doing. They don't realize the ramifications of this moment. Think about that person you resent the most in life, the person you really think has abused you and abused their position and abused their power. And maybe they have. But do you know their entire background, the full history of their childhood, their teenage years? Do you know how they were raised? Do you know the private, hidden torments they've been through, the breakups they had in college, the divorces? You don't, do you? I don't either. And even Jesus, who did know what his enemies had been through, who did have a full picture of their blind spots and also their deliberate sins, chose to cut some slack for these misguided, stupid human men with their hammers and their nails. Here's yet another storm-tossed illustration from aboard the deck of the Cain. That psychotic ship captain, Krieg, made life pure hell for the officers and crew. Pretty soon they all hated him. They had grudges that were as red hot as the mortar shells flying overhead. But author Herman Wouk describes a scene where the central character, Willie Keith, would go out on the deck and just look at the surging ocean, the vast expanse of sky. And he could, at least for a while, the author writes, reduce Quig to a sickly, well-meaning man struggling with a job beyond his powers. Oh, there's another pivotal scene where Steve Marek, the executive officer, and Kiefer, the ship's communications officer, go over to the Fifth Fleet to tell Admiral Halsey that their captain is a loony and that he ought to be replaced under Navy Article 184. In fact, Marek has a log he's kept chronicling all of the dumb, paranoid, schizoid things the captain has done. And when Kiefer begins a rant against Quig about what a tyrant he is, what an abusive, evil officer he is, Marek shuts him up with his own argument. That's beside the point, Tom. If the old man's sick in the head, there's nothing to be sore about. And Kiefer, after a long pause, reluctantly nods. True enough. It's like a blind person stepping on your foot. It hurts, but you don't get mad about it. In his chapter, Nice People or new men out of the Christian classic Mere Christianity. C.S. Lewis addresses a Captain Queeg type problem that bothers a lot of people. And it's this: why are so many Christians jerky? Why do Christians mash your foot on the subway? Why are they so judgmental? Why are they so unfriendly in church? Why do some of them who live in Northern Ireland light fuses to bomb and kill innocent children? Why do Christians here in the United States, men who've been baptized in the tank on a Sunday morning, why do these Christians go out at midnight in a pickup truck and torch a black church or a Jewish synagogue or a Muslim mosque? Why aren't these so-called new men and new women very nice people? And why shouldn't I hold a grudge against a person who acts like that? Well, Lewis acknowledges the reality that when we Christians behave badly, we make Christianity unbelievable to the watching world. But at the very end of the chapter, he gives us this quiet reminder, and really it comes right from the foot of the cross, where Jesus whispers those words about blindness and forgiveness. I'm quoting Lewis. What can you ever really know about other people's souls, of their temptations, their opportunities, their struggles? One soul in the whole creation you do know, and it is the only one whose fate is placed in your hands. If there is a God, you are, in a sense, alone with him. Perhaps we should all put ourselves on the deck of that ship, the Cain. Everywhere around us are hurting, confused, paranoid, battle-scarred people, stepping on our toes, hurting our feelings, issuing stupid orders. Some soldiers are hurting in the head, and some are just plain bad. How can we know the difference? How can we decide who to nurse a grudge against? How can we decide whether to mutiny or stay with the ship? It's hard, isn't it? But all around you is the surging power of the ocean, the forgiveness of Calvary, the tenderness of the Savior who says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing.